We just, over the news wire, just received a late-breaking medical story. It says that the dangers of secondhand acoustical guitar music is even greater than has been previously imagined. Only fools enjoy debating the nature of existence. Okay, you're right. It could be put less harshly. Only civilized, sophisticated people enjoy such a debate. Within each man is a piece of a star. Some's still twinkle, some's do not. Today's myth. Once upon a time, some wolves found an abandoned child and raised it as their own, teaching him that staying alive is the only thing serious. Then when he eventually matured into the actual species he asked them, but isn't being a man also a thing serious? And the wolves told him, you're going to have to get out of here. Truism update. Yes, everyone has a mind of their own. Only problem is, it belongs to life. Man, history, and the facts. Originally, people thought seriousness was silly. But then, as they became more civilized, they thought, what the hell, and let it go. Tune in next time, if you're able. You can explain the mind by the brain and explain the brain by the mind, but you cannot explain them both to a man who has only the two. Remember this, from a more expansive view, anything that anyone can say about man, no matter how gross or despicable, is untrue. Once you can see beyond the physical and perceive the purpose of man's mental collective behavior, you can understand then civilization itself to be a kind of living myth. Individuality equals freedom, for which most men are ill-equipped. Freedom equals individuality, for which few men have any taste. Another way you might tell that you're making progress is that what used to be serious is no longer serious, and what used to be funny is funny no more. And an additional message to the mystically inclined. As regards the collective, if men stopped talking so much, civilization would fall apart right before their eyes. And if you did so individually, your own private form might also. Kind of makes you want to try it. To help prove his sincerity of interest and his commitment to intellectual discovery, this one guy would periodically stand outside of life's house and lead himself in this cheer. Give me a Q, give me a U, give me an E, give me an S, give me a T and an ION. Give me an answer. Dumb people like to talk about dumb things. What do you like to talk about? A father asked his son, if I did tell you everything about everything, what would you have then? And the kid replied, a brand new blank blackboard? Today's legend. On a certain world, men dreamed of a lost mine wherein would be found a miraculous ore. One man went off and discovered it, and to help others likewise interested, when he returned, he lied about it. Today's legend number 2. Why the hell would he lie about it? Still in regards to the way the mind works and what appears to be historically, right up until instant time, mysticism, and tied into it the mind's unending, inescapable drive to impose a sense of order on disorder, and then even greater order on that, and etc., which is another definition of civilization. There was an item lately that mentioned the difficulty of presenting the core of what would be some sort of metagnostic, transcendental, mystical thought to the public because of the inability to engage in brand comparisons, the fact that there is never a special sale price, and that there is no useful purpose in having testimonials. Consider the brand comparisons. Start off easy again, for it to sound as though we're dealing with quite concrete physical reality, which is easiestly expressed by bringing in other people to start with. Use them as your diving board and swimming pool. The difficulty in trying to present any idea, and I don't mean just a stray, anomalous one that pops into someone's mind, but the idea historically of mysticism. You could even look at it as all of the major religions before they were a religion. The difficulty is you cannot engage in brand comparisons. And any time that you're presenting ideas under whatever guise, you're engaged in a sort of selling proposition. If some man 2,000 years ago just walked out under a fig tree and hollered, "What ho!" to passersby and says, "You think things are strange or you think things are weird here in Macedonia, come over here and I'll tell you what's actually going on." To do it then or to do it now under some guise, it is extremely difficult to present it, assuming there's some reason that somebody tried. We'll get to the more individual specifics in a second, but consider the fact of why, although it's still just a part of the justice of why, ideas that would seem to be, that are dreamed of being a kind of miraculous ore that might be in the mind that man has in some way lost. Some way he has abandoned it, he's wandered away from it. That if there is something miraculous, sometimes referred to as the mystical, why is it not more readily available? Why is it so scarce? Why is it so seldom seen? Why is it, in fact, sometimes believed to be hidden purposefully? Part of the justice of that is that it cannot be sold publicly on a large scale, and part of that justice being that it is not possible to present it on the basis of brand comparisons. Assuming, I have been, that you understand brand comparisons, that is right now, of no great importance, but right now it's probably one of the more popular forms of commercial advertising, is pointing out, what you always have to do when you're dealing with secondary non-biological, non-biosurvival materials, objects, goods, and services, you've got to sell it. You got to do some body movements, you got to whine, you got to sound like you're real happy and excited in your voice. Hey, why don't you break out that kind of monotone and show people how exciting this kind of thing can really be? Well, all right. Hey, it doesn't cost any more, does it? It might. It's easy to say it doesn't, because you can say, well, you just did it, so it didn't cost anything. All debits are not necessarily the kind that show up on your bank account. At any rate, I'm just going to point out that one of the more popular forms now, but it's always got to be true. I'll get to it in a second. It has to do with the partisan nature of consciousness, the ordinary mind. But you do know now that nowadays one of the most popular forms is they'll say, do you have acid indigestion? Well, why take brand X and acids? which can take up to 30 minutes to work, when ours can take up to, can work in only 2 minutes. And of course, they name names and they're making an absolute comparison or say, what does this car look like? If it was a print ad or a TV ad, visual, say, what does this car look like? Not only does it look like a European sports car model, sedan, but it also looks like what? 50,000, 60,000, even 70,000? No, this is made right here in Omaha and it only costs X amount, 20,000. That it is a continual process of brand comparisons. Consider, now see, religion, once it gets to be organized, at least you try to jump ahead and you fall into a small gopher hole. Religions do it. They vary from being fairly subtle about it to being blunt as a Arkansas bricklayer's forehead. Comes from teaching his dog how to chase parked cars, but so I heard. Anything that is not necessary for survival has to be sold. Well, you've been through that. I know you've heard it, and it was not that difficult to grasp. They simply have to be sold. The example I consider to be obvious is they do not have to advertise commercially or even non-commercially to encourage people to eat. Not sane people. And if insane people die of starvation, great loss, right? You do not have to sell people on the idea of eating. But you do have to sell them on the idea of you should eat this. You should eat Colonel Zingbat's grapefruit flakes for breakfast because they're a lot better than chocolate choo-choos such and such. You have to sell it on the idea. And you will inevitably, whether you do it specifically or not, as I said, you will engage in brand comparisons unless you're the only one on the market. Because there's the possibility, since your flakes are no better than anybody else's. Well, they're not. Not insofar as eating. Where, again, assuming you're a sane person, you could look after yourself with no advertising. You could, if you were sane enough and handy enough, you could probably, even today, look after yourself without even a grocery store if you had enough acreage and were inclined to grow your own food. So, Colonel X's or Company X's brand flakes is no better than Company Y's brand flakes. I know that they can say they are and they might have more vitamins, etc., but you understand what I'm saying. Insofar as staying alive, you do not need either one. You do not need something commercially made. You do not need to go to a restaurant. If that confuses you too much, they have to say to come and eat at a McDonald's or a Burger Doodle. Again, it's not that there's anything particular wrong with the food, but they've got to sell you on the fact of leave the house and come out here and pay twice as much as it would cost to fix this at home. I mean, it's no secret, but you think, you're right. I'm spending $3 for a thing and I could put it together, even at the grocery store, at inflated prices. I could put it together for 50 cents. But they have to go, yeah, but come on out to Burger Doodle where the kids have lots of fun and you can get a cup with Colonel Burger Doodle's face on it. They have to do all that for the simple fact that you do not need to go. You need to eat, but you do not need to eat their stuff. Therefore, unless you're the only game in town, if you're the only game in town, you wouldn't have to advertise, so there is no such thing commercially. In the secondary market, there is no one game in town. If you came up on a whole new market of selling non-essentials, you would have that market yourself how long? Oh, I'd guess about 48 hours. And then your brother-in-law or somebody, as soon as they saw, God damn, I never thought of that. So the point is, you'll never have the market in secondary items. You'll never have it alone for long. So you've always got competition. You've got to understand you're in competition with somebody and neither one of your products are necessary. It's just a simple fact. And so since they're not necessary, without them ever giving it any sort of psychological thought in this manner, they just understand that the most efficient way is just almost inescapable. Even if it seems to be tacit, it is almost inescapable to engage in brand comparisons because you're dealing with non-essentials. And so if there's any chance that consumer X is going to buy something they don't need, why should they buy yours? It's no more worthy, it's no more needed than your competitors. So there it is. They're faced with two moot choices. You almost, even beyond tacit, but you almost have to blatantly engage in brand comparisons. Trying to sell this sort of stuff, and as you know, I don't mean just me and us standing here, but historically, this kind of stuff, you cannot engage in brand comparisons. Now, if that was of any importance publicly, I started that because I thought it would be easiest to see. In other words, if someone, if the purpose was to make this sort of thing popular, let's say right now, doing this, and it is damn near poster child for impossibility to get ordinary people interested, to sell it, to even get them mildly interested if you do not engage in brand comparisons. Now the obvious one would be, let's just say instead of me, let's say that we got this fictitious guy that's up teaching some New Age form of Islamic Zen. I'm just making up something for you. He says it's something new. It doesn't matter what. He says, I've got something new for all of you people who have been interested in meditation and the kind of Far Eastern philosophies and as exemplified by Zen, along with some of the more spiritual rituals, the more spiritual traditions of Islam. Then I have put them together, I have brought them up to date, put them in modern, psychologically sound terminology, and it is nothing. It is far beyond what you will get down the street, and he might even name names, or he just might say anything that you would find now in America, presenting itself as Zen. It far surpasses any of that, or anything that is now considered the so-called Sufi schools, or anyone who says that they are engaged in the mystical core tradition of Islam. That may be true, but they are not up to date. They are still caught in the past, and what I am doing here is based upon sound Western psychological principles, while yet faithful to the great spiritual and intellectual tradition. To do that at all, the person has to engage in brand comparisons. An ordinary person, well, let's assume, could hear all of this thus far, if they were interested, and say, well, that's true. To actually get people to leave the Zen school that they were going to, or to get them to come over to this guy when they were considering moving to New York and trying to find some particular Sufi teacher. No. So you went too fast. Not just sell somebody to that degree. When I say sell it to the public, when I say present it, I mean to the point that you put it out there, and it was not simply, as some of the mystics used to say, an ephemeral fart in the wind. To present it out there and actually put up an ad, or a man get up and say just what I said about why you should come to his new version of Islamic Zen. And he made this huge announcement, or put a big spot on TV. It would go out and be like a radio, television signal. It would go out through the electromagnetic spectrum, and it's as though it just went through everyone's radio or television and their consciousness, such as pork ribs through a goose. It's like you didn't have to go back and wonder about the ratio to how much you spent to each potential respondent, like call this number, and then you figure out, that it cost me, $1 for each one. You wouldn't have to pay somebody to do that. The ratio would be 0 to nothing, or 0 to everything. Because without some sort of brand comparison, there'd be no response. When people would hear it, and if you said, did you hear that? You might make them remember last night they saw it on TV. Oh, it's something. And you say, well, what was it? Geez, I don't know. It just almost goes through the mind and leaves no footprint. Now let's get down to what should be of some interest. Look at the difficulty intellectually when you've got nothing, if you're doing it correctly, which here's one of the beautiful, this is like the mother of all catch-22s. It's better than that. It's the mother of all catch-22s who was aborted inside out before you were born. It's this. I was going to point the difficulty of being able individually to do it. Well, here it is. If you can't figure out what it is, you're pretty close to doing it right. I'm doing this for, for ordinary people. Wait a minute. That can be explained. And several people's head says, God, I hope so. So we got a solid diving board that I can keep jumping back to. You do understand that literally, I don't mean me, and I'm not referring to anybody in particular in the past, but I assure you, anybody, the reality behind the Socrateses and the Confuciuses and the Zarathrustras and the Mohammeds and the Moses and everybody, the reality behind that, when they started, they could not sell it. And nobody could now. If a Jesus or a Muhammad actually showed up, they could not sell real mystical thought, transcendental thought. They could not sell thought. We're not talking about insanity, remember. We're talking about the core that I was already suggesting to you that is the core of not only our religion, but civilization itself is like this unbroken core of some kind of information. Secret knowledge, it's always been called, and I'll let it go at that for the time being. There's a much shorter word for it. But this core that goes through, guy shows up now, whoever you thought was the greatest in the past, Buddha shows back up and says, all right, I've had 2,500 years to lay there and think about it. Nobody bothered me, so I've really given a lot of thought, and I think I can improve upon the way I did it before. No, my man, you stayed down too long. Being the ground did not ripen you any more than it does a watermelon that's been plucked once and then put back in the ground. You cannot sell it to the public. And not because of some kind of curse, not because of the work of nefarious forces. It's again having to do with the binary nature of energy in a three-dimensional world as exemplified by man's polarized thinking. No escape from it at the ordinary level. Unless you have something to oppose, unless you can engage in brand comparisons, it cannot be sold to the public. They cannot hear it. This would be true with anything. That's why I try to get you to see. As mundane as cornflakes. As mundane as anything unnecessary. And you got to admit there is nothing approaches the unnecessariness of this. Even McDonald's. Even reconstructive surgery to one's earlobes falls somewhere higher up the scale of that which is necessary than this kind of stuff. So you cannot sell it without brand comparisons. Buddha could, nobody could. You cannot take this cord that is not necessary and sell it. And the reason I want you to get firmly in your, what do you call it? Mind. Is it cannot be sold for one reason. Not because that poor old mystics, which they love to do this, as you know, the drugstore variety, the after hours kind, that, well, it's just that the world is full of evil forces, or the world is full of stupid, dense people, full of people of the wrong vibrations or something. And they just won't hear the truth when someone of my ilk comes along and tries to help them. Huh. No. Not that. But again, the justice of it is just, what do you call it? Inescapable. Because even that fits. That ordinary people can come along and say, well, God or the spirit of Muhammad or Moses or Buddha sent me here to tell the truth. And what happens? I went out of my way. I took off from work. I lost my job. My wife left me. I'm out here trying, out of the goodness of my heart. Maybe, make a living, but maybe not the goodness of my heart. Tried to tell people the truth. And what happened? They ignore me. It all fits. You cannot sell it to the public because there is no brand comparison possible. That is part of when, let's assume, as people dream that there was a mystical core, some secret core. Some secret knowledge was at the heart of all the world's religions. Let's assume that. They did not become the world's religion until they started engaging in brand comparison. Look back in history. That's when they showed up. That's the first time you ever heard of Moses. They went back later and rewrote gave him a little story, a little Bible for him. But when you first actually heard of him of any importance in the stage is when he showed up and he went, hey, I got the truth, or I got some new truth, because you people are down here worshiping, statues. You got a whole damn yard full of different kinds of gods. I got the new stuff. Now he had to do that. That's the first time you heard of him, right? If you doubt it, go back, reread the Bible. First time you ever heard of Muhammad. Again, they go back and say, well, he was a nice man, made a good living, and was decent to his kids. But then one day he was kind of hanging out, and the Spirit said, hey, start talking, I'll tell you what to say. And the first thing he started saying, what's the first words of the Quran? Supposedly the first thing they told him. There is no God but God. There is no Allah but Allah. Imposing order upon that which seemed to be disorder at the time. But you understand it had to be brand comparisons. He is saying what you have been doing in the past, and his story was similar to the historical story of Moses, that there the Arab tribes just had an endless amount of gods. But anyway, all religions, you must know that's true by now, is that he did, that's when you heard about it. When Jesus showed up, hit the stage, when Buddha got popular really, is when, according to history, he started brand comparisons. Before that, if people dream if there was a secret teaching and knowledge going on, it was before you ever heard of them, historically. All that's irrelevant, but now it's just I know people enjoy that, for those of you that can't afford to subscribe to the Inquirer or the National Star. Plus, as far as I know, they hadn't gotten around to digging up the dirt like I know on those guys. So, I mean, where else you going to get it except here? No, I won't say that. I see one of them just sent me this telegraphic. What do you call it? Not telegraphic. That's Fred Morris that sends that code. They asked me not to do it anyway. So the firm part I was trying to get established is you could not sell this if that was your intent. It's not just a theory. You can see it. Just the little parts I just got through pointing out historically. Every time something hits the stage that is anywhere connected with the mystical, such as religions, the beginning of it is always, no matter that they go back and doctor up and do a brief bio of how the person got there, or how the religion somewhere started before it actually started, the starting place was when this guy, and all religions have a guy, a founder, is when he started brand comparisons. Like saying, well, here I am with Islam, or here I am with, we're going to call it the religion of our fathers, the Judaism. We got this, and we got this other brand. This other one, you got to run it through the washer like 20 times, like you're playing to 20 gods. This one over here, like this new tide, one time. Half a box, half a cup. You have apparently put a new form of order on this other disorder. Comparably speaking, even though the people at the time may not have considered over here having to worship 10 gods at a time. Every day you got to go and pay 10 different gods. They didn't consider that disorder, they were used to it, but comparably speaking, he shows up and says, you don't have to you don't have to wash each dish before you put it in the washing machine. You don't have to put in 10 cups of powder. I got the new one. It's known as Jehovah. All it takes is half a cup. But it has to be the only time when it starts, historically, the only time that you hear of it, if you ever do, is once brand comparisons start. That's the only time, and people go, well, okay. I got 10 over here. Maybe they want to, they're going to charge me as much, but over here it takes 10 times as long to walk around all those 10 gods. I have to buy and do all that. And I go over here and I just do it once. Yep. There has to be a comparison. I know that's not what religion would want to call it, but there has to be a sales pitch. And the sales pitch has to be that this is more orderly. They would say this is more truthful. This is the truth. This is better. It's more beneficial. But it is more orderly, and it has to be based on brand comparisons. You cannot jump out and start a new religion. You cannot jump out, even if you had the direct word from the guy that had all the secret knowledge, from God, from Allah, and you were right there, and you just jumped out and said, all right, I hadn't got time to screw around with all this damn brand comparison and trying to sell you people. I'm here just to tell you the truth. Okay, you ready? And you go, okay. And he goes, da-da-da-da-dam. And he left. It'd be the same thing as me saying without any brand comparisons, and you stuck it out on the air. It would be like just a spit in the wind and a hurricane. It'd go through people and they'd never hear it. There has to be brand comparisons. Now back to the individual. Not only do you have the difficulty, the impossibility of selling it, presenting it to the public, if you should try, but look at the difficulty individually of trying to get a grasp on what it is. And you know why? I've explained it several ways. Because when you're doing it correctly, of course, you don't know what's going on. That was the little thing I did about the headache, is how can you tell that you're kind of moving along the right track? Well, that's because you're not quite sure what the hell this is all about. That's how you know you're all right. But once you can realize, once you start like, I begin to see what he's up to. I begin to see now what this is. I mean, I'm not sure I can put a name on it, but it's some kind of revised, or maybe perhaps one I've never heard of. It is some faction of Sufism, or this is Zen, but it's in some way it's been taken, it's been extracted from the actual Buddhist basis. That's what this is. Then you feel a bit more confident. And you may even say, well, now I'm not sure because I don't know what to call it. Now I'll wait and see, where it goes. But at least I got some idea now. You've started your own brand comparisons. You have now started selling yourself, and you poor idiot, you're buying. And that's what people don't ordinarily realize. Well, I'm beginning to feel better now that I've figured this out. All right, you're beginning to buy it. But look who you're buying it from. You're buying it from you. Why would you go buy? Well, the mind itself, we're jumping past simplistic interpretation that could be made of that from a psychological view. Let's get right into electrochemical brain functions, the reality of physics as exercised inside the human skull. Nothing seems to make any particular sense. Or you can look at it another way. Nothing will hold the mind's interest at the ordinary level without brand comparisons. You, an individual, saying you generically, but what I just described, the scenario, is no more inane, it is no more unexpected or untoward for the human mind individually to start doing that, to go, hey, I'm beginning to get a better grip on this because all it is so-and-so. That is no more unexpected, it is no more flawed, it is no more an error at the ordinary level than is what I described of mysticism, if it existed at some particular time and place, such as Buddha's ideas, becoming Buddhism. That the mind collectively at the place had to turn the idea, had to turn the information into something capable of being subjected to brand comparisons. Collectively speaking, that is inescapable. If it is escapable, then you never hear of it. If it had been escapable, again, pretending that Buddhism and the whole scenario took place as historically presented, if Buddha was able to engage in, if he was able to escape it becoming a religion, if he had been able to escape it becoming subjected to brand comparisons, then you would never heard of it, which is fair enough. But then, of course, in ordinary mind, it's kind of hard pressed for that and go, well, how can I prove that? Because I've already heard of it. Shape up! What the hell's wrong with you? Oh, I'm sorry. Shape up! Hey, what the hell's wrong with you? Trying to learn a lesson from ordinary commercialism. They find more faith in making it sound happy and positive than that kind of, sound of someone's cosmic mother, shape up! Hey, if you tried it another way, it might work better! Okay. Individually, and when I say I'm saying generically, not just any one of you in particular, it is everyone in particular here that has been sincerely and earnestly following this out there in great TV land. To listen to this, not just me, but this sort of thing, there is no misstepping on anyone's part for it to go on and on for a long time. And you think, your best thought, you think, what the hell is this? I seem to like it. It seems to do something to me. But what the hell is it? And this is not just theoretical, because the problem is, how can you keep yourself going? All right, this is theoretical. All right, rhetorical. It's how can you keep yourself doing something? Not only do you not know where it's going, You don't know what the exact purpose is. But every time you begin to imagine, if you're doing it right, which is not really your fault yet, but if you're doing it anywhere right, every time you start thinking that you know where it's going, in a sense you go, shut up, fool. Put another way, you should. That every time you think, wait a minute, something he just mentioned, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like such and such practice or idea that I read that some Zen teacher said, and God, it was somewhere back in the 500s ADs. Or it was something, wait a minute, that is something, if I remember from the Bhagavad Gita, it sounded like that was part of what one of those warriors said when they were out there on the plains, and somebody said, did I just hear Vishnu sneeze? But you know what that represents? But when you do it good, you hear that, and it's entertainment. You don't take it as comparison, or back to what I said, you go, shut up! And yet, if anybody's following us, and yet it felt like, wait a minute, I was just on the verge of beginning to, what do people like to say? Get a handle on this thing. Who the hell wants to have some kind of great mystical internal adventure with a handle? Jesus. All right, what if you were taking a trip and you sit down at the airport to get your ticket, somebody can come along and go and walk off with it. Now, that's best if you're going to have any baggage at all. Do not have handles on it. But then if you're following that, a good, astute, ordinary mind could say, well, wait a minute, how am I going to pick it up? Even me. Aha! Now we're getting somewhere. It didn't make it on tape the other night when we were talking about, I started talking about the happy voice and how you, not just commercialism, but even religion, but everything that you have to sell, but nowadays is considered that kind of happy, smiley voice all the way from disc jockeys to the pitchmen, the voiceovers, but didn't make it on the videotape that some of you seem to like. I just mention it for their benefit because I have mentioned about those kind of involuntary things do. But if you watch people that do show up, even those that do it for a living, it's not so common, or if they ever tried to stop it, they found they couldn't. It is almost as though the body itself, which has no interest in cars, much less selling cars, has no interest in cornflakes, much less selling them. But it's almost as though if you watch, and some of the professionals, reading the news, or professional guys and girls, or the great spokesmen, the pitchmen that make the big money, show up for several different products, you can see them in their body. It's almost as though their body's going, don't do that. And them smiling, or ministers, they're great at it. Is them going, yes, well, what God wants you to. This was just, the only reason I bring it up for you people out there on tape is it seemed to have been of some interest here in the studio. But it is almost as though the body is rebelling, like, what the hell are you doing? What are you? That the body knows that this is a pile of cornflakes. You know, what a bunch of, and it's like the body, and they just can't stop it. And so I assume somewhere along the line, even dramatic coaches, whoever they brought in to try and calm these pitchmen down, or politicians, another great one. And I'm talking about, yes, if you'll elect me, you know, all I'll do for you. I'm exaggerating a little, but just look. You cannot see anyone selling anything that does not move. And I do not mean choreographed moves. About the best they can do, and they look phony as hell, is, if you remember the poem from last time about trying to be graceful can make you be clumsy, trying to seem hip can make you seem square. Well, at any rate, I know that it's obvious that they teach some of them that they've gone through their speech, and the man says, or the pitchman or politician says, and be sure when you vote to pull the number 3 ballot and vote for me. And I mean, I'm exaggerating a little, but you've seen that and you think, oh, come on, the guy's so wooden. They've almost given up, either trying to teach somebody to do specific things like be sure and vote for me, or buy this car. It is so, look at the beautiful line. And you think, it's not working. It's either that, or they just say, don't move. Quit doing all this stuff. And so it would appear that somewhere along the way, just in a mechanical, everyday sense, that life or local conditions had to just tell everybody, forget it. Because They can't either teach them how to do this kind of thing that look like it's natural, or teach them not to do anything. Which is also tied into comparisons, brand comparison, but that would get too far afield for even us. So back to where we were. Individually, to believe that you're beginning to get a handle on something is, not in an absolutely terminal sense, but is a form of part-time suicide, because it will make you stop. It makes words begin to make sense. It causes them to your mind to make sense, wherein it should be the spaces between the words. It should be the holes in what appears to be reasonable, sequential ideas. So let's say that any form of transcendental thinking, anything that seems that is a more direct representation of this continuing core of dreamed of secret info, secret knowledge, the more it is presented just out of a clear blue sky, let's say it in particular, how you like that, time and place. What the hell does that have to do with time and place? Well, that's time, that's place. I could have done just in particular time, but I said in particular time and place. It was both of them. All right. If you knew how to do it every time that your mind would say, oh, I'm beginning to understand it now, you would unfocus it. You would unhypnotize yourself. You would look off. You can't argue with it, because if you argue with it, you're a part of the brand comparisons. The brand comparisons, the only thing that's of any particular interest to any one individual, or should be, is the operations of your own ordinary intellect. Because you cannot fit in ideas, you cannot take them in, you will not consider purchasing them, you will not consider carrying them on once you hear them. That's what I mean by selling them. You hear it, you read it, or even you think it, that you apparently don't know, that you do not trace it to a particular external source, you suddenly have this thought. And if it does not lend itself immediately to some brand comparison, that is, it does not readily lend itself to be compared to something you already know, thought, you'll dismiss it, you'll forget it, you'll ignore it. That's the difference between an ordinary mind and a mystic. Because in one real sense, ordinary people, you got to remember, life's having 6 billion thoughts constantly, every second. So in a sense, everybody has what is to them an original thought. They engage in original thinking, but the difference between a mystic and ordinary mind is ordinary people ignore it. That's not really the word, but that's the best. Well, I've already described it. They ignore it. Everybody has original thoughts. They just come and go, but it's like just a small headache or a twitch. You just ignore it. The difference between the ordinary mind and mystic is the mystic doesn't ignore it. You might think it's easy, if you're ordinary, you might think it's easy to talk about having any creative thought or in any way being an individual or in any way being original, but that is not simple. Even though a person can believe it's simple to say, and it's not simple to understand. Because if you take in those 3 words, for instance, seriously, then you're none of the 3. You're not creative, you're not original, and you're not an individual. If your mind goes, I know exactly what you mean by that, because the world is full of Philistines, and sometimes I guess even I am a Philistine. But I do know what originality is. I know when it's lacking in me. I know when I am simply parroting something I read, and etc. They can go on forever. You realize they've already stepped into it. You can carry that on forever. Carry that on. Any time you want to. See, that was just time. And it doesn't matter what place you occupy on this planet. How can you get the mind to think about something? We'll ease up on again one more time. How can you get the mind to think about something that it doesn't see why it should think about it? Refine it a little bit, sharpen it. How can you get the mind to think about something that if every time it tries to think about it, you go, shut up, fool? or every time it begins to get a better view of it, that is vague, is uncertain, is shaky, as the image seems, and then you think it several times, and it's like the mind goes, well, it's beginning to come more in focus. And as soon as it does, you go, and the mind's going, what it's wanting to do is holler, God damn it, give me your eyeballs back, because it wants to go. Well, that's what being serious, that's what being intelligent, that's what being reflective, meditative is. I mean, you don't believe it, you want to see heavy ruminations, go look at a cow. The mind wants to focus, and the mind cannot focus if it has no stable object to focus on. And so there it is. Back to the question, why would a mind think about something that every time it apparently is about to get a handle on it, you grab the bag and run off? Or about the time it's beginning to come into focus, and the mind goes, and it begins to come up with certain words, its own new interpretations, puts together a few, perhaps even already known modifiers, but strings them together in an unexpected manner, and goes, this sort of thing is more like blah, 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 blah. And every time it does that, it begins to have a bit of a feel of satisfaction, of some progress, which takes, and every time it does, you go, and it's like the mind keeps saying, will you stop it? Will you stop it a minute? And it's like your mind's poor little hands grasping at those yucky muscles you see drawn in high school textbooks that go back from your eyes, that go back in there. It looks, imagine these little hands, and they're trying to get up there and get hold of all those little muscles that go right into your eyeballs. Ew. And it's like they're trying to grab it and say, stop it! Stare for me. Argentina. Sharpen it some more. Why would a mind, that was two stages, why would a mind think about anything? Make this the last one for the night, the last sharpen, the last stroke at this time. Why would the mind think about something that can't be thought about? All right, sub-refinement. Why would the mind think about anything if it is told beforehand? If you are able to think about what I'm about to tell you, the way you'll know it is you won't be able to think about it. And the mind goes, ha. Now we're getting somewhere. I've been waiting for a real challenge. Yeah, right, yeah. Tell that to an ordinary mind in the same way as you go tell that to an ordinary person. I started to say a psychologist, but you better not, in case if he has any potential police powers, that is, that he's close to a courthouse and knows how to seek a writ and have you committed. Don't go around saying that sort of thing in public, in a public place. Why would a mind think about something that the only way that it can know that it's making any progress, that it knows that it's approaching anything resembling an understanding of what it was just heard or trying to think about, is that it can't think about it? Now, I bet if we had a good mind here right off the street, it could go, aha. Talk about warming over Zen. Talk about taking just your standard non sequitur and trying to drag it out for 58 minutes and talk about secret knowledge. You know, Jesus. If there was a punchline, ad hocly, you could say that mysticism, the only way to identify it as mysticism, ain't like anything. Anything. And as soon as it is, it ain't. Now, as easily as a walking off the street reader of Zen could dismiss this, as I just did for them, and say, oh, come on, that's... People have done that before. Yeah, they have. As easy as that is for an ordinary person to dismiss it, there's no way to look at it. I guess we could have somewhere in the middle. We could have, let's say, an armchair mystic that could hear such as that and go, you know, this kind of stuff interests me, but if you're actually telling the truth, or what little bit I heard tonight several times, that's downright discouraging. Because even I get a little glimpse of what you're saying, and what you're saying is that if you're getting close to having your own consciousness work in that kind of manner, it's on the basis that what you're beginning to understand, the new things you understand is that you can't think about them. I almost hear that. I'm doing the ordinary person. They go, I almost hear that, but really that's kind of discouraging. That's kind of put offish. You could say that, but there's no way to look at it. Which I assure you that many people, men, women, and otherwise, before you have done, that understood it. There's no way to look at it. It gives you an infinite playing field. It gives you, if nothing else, in your 50 or 60 or 70 short years here, or long years, according to how you look at it and who's holding your return ticket, is that you realize you have the one hobby, the one field of interest that never expires. You may collect. I guess it would take some doing, but I guess you could collect, get up to date, and stay current on postage stamps. I agree you'd probably have to live in a parking lot at the post office, but it could be done. You could exhaust your hobby. And if you don't believe that, people do, not just physical hobbies of collecting stamps, but people exhaust the hobby of being a person, a human. They exhaust the mind that once the hormones begin to properly wear down, people exhaust the hobby of thinking. Most people have exhausted it. Most people have collected all the stamps they're ever going to collect by the time they're mature, being one of the operational definitions of being grown and mature. That, yeah, I'm sick of thinking. Screw it. Then it's like local conditions. The city says, welcome home, son. Glad you finally made it. Finally wised up. Yeah. No more thinking for me. Oh, I'll think what I already think now, and if somebody else doesn't think the same way, I'll think, boy, what an idiot. Congratulations. So you exhaust any hobby. And the only real hobbies to men, by the way, although we can talk about sports and etc., the only real hobbies to men are those above the hypothalamus. It's only neural hobbies that are actually human hobbies. And at first you could say, if I'd carried this along a certain line, you could say, well, yeah, that's one of the great things about intellectual hobbies is there's no end to it. They could prove it. I can prove it for them. They say, well, all right, I've been studying, I didn't major in it, but I have always been interested in astronomy. I take night classes now. I belong to an astronomy book club. They're always making new discoveries. There's just no end to it. Sounds nice, but they missed it. It is exhaustive. But comparably speaking, it would seem that the world of intellect is the area wherein that you can just go on and on. Never too old to learn. Ha ha ha. There is only one area that is inexhaustible, and that is the area of mysticism. You didn't lose your place. I was bringing in the withal, the other side of the coin, that we could take a view and say, well, if the descriptions I've just heard, that the way that you can be assured that you're sort of thinking in a mystical way is that you can't think about it. And that every time you're beginning to understand something in a transcendental manner is that, you can't think about it. That sounds somewhat put-offing. Okay. Except the way to look at it is, what you have before you is an inexhaustible hobby. No one like the one from last time that said that a real mystic only has one tradition. I mean, everybody else, they've got Think about it. Everybody else they have buildings, they have places to go, they have certain times of year, that's certain rituals. They always have more than one. And usually it involves a movement, many times costume, sometimes eating, sometimes it begins to verge into primary survival matters, but rituals with ordinary people. The more civilized they are, the greater the ritual. Look at the difference between nature-loving or nature-worshiping tribes out in the wilds compared to a Baptist church, or look at a Baptist church compared to the Greek Orthodox. The more civilized, educated they are, the more complex become the rituals. A real mystic has but one ritual. If he has any, he got one. Well, tradition, I should say. The tradition is, keep going. The footnote is, like there's a choice. But remember, anytime there are two ways to put this at least. And some of us keep hedging around trying to refrain from doing it. And by some of us, I'll go ahead and admit, I mean me. There's the two ways of looking at it. Two ways of describing it and looking at it. And whatever you think you understand, just immediately ignore it. The other way is, anything that you think you understand, well, there's three ways. There could be four. No, we're out of time, so there's three. Anything you think you understand, do not put it in words. Period. Or the third one, anything you think you understand, or let's assume you do. But you got to remember that there's one motto of a real mystic also, that is, redundancy sucketh. So you understood it. So what? Keep going. Now do you understand individually, after all of this, why this sort of thing is so overwhelmingly popular within your own mind? Why you're addicted to it? Or, put a more truthful way, why at times everyone's mind thinks, I am absolutely addicted to this. Whatever it takes, I'd do it. I couldn't stop if I wanted to. And all you got to do is glance away, have a burger, have a shake, stump your toe, burp, and you think, God, I can't take this anymore. This is driving me nuts. What a hobby. If anybody else had a hobby, if anybody else felt that way about stamp collecting, they did that once or twice, they'd finally throw the damn book away. And they think, well, crap, I know I enjoy it sometimes, but half the time, it just gives me the red ass. I'm sick of this. I'll find something else. This is the only hobby that you can keep going through that if you know how to do it. If you're doing it correctly. I shouldn't keep saying if you know how to do it, because you don't know how to do it. If you're doing it, it is a big A. Accident. Fate. You're born in the right house. Leave it with the tradition. Keep going. Until next time.